because number one, the process of doing the mind maps really kind of everything was kind of coming together. But then the ability after all those months and months and months of studying to sit back and to look at one or two pages and see where everything fits in with everything else was so helpful for me, not only to understand it. That mind map book was what I used exclusively the last week of studying. It's all I looked at. And
welcome back to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. And I have a successful Florida student who survived, I think that's the right word, the craziest Florida bar exam probably in history. Hi, Al. How are you?
Great, Jackson. How are you?
Good. It must be an incredible feeling of relief to have passed the Florida bar.
It really, truly is.
This was your first time taking the exam. You're licensed where?
So I'm licensed in New Jersey, and I took the New Jersey and the New York bar exams in 2002, fortunately passed both. And this has been my first time taking an exam since then, so it's been a while.
So 18, 19 years between exams, and you happened to catch the tiger by the tail, didn't you? What a crazy experience this was in Florida this year.
It really was.
So talk to us a little bit about what it was that caused you to decide you wanted to sit for the exam and how that process worked out.
Yeah, so my experience is perhaps a little bit unique. I'm from New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey up until this past summer, and we had planned to move down here to the state of Florida several years down the road when our kids were done with school. I had a law practice up in New Jersey since 2005 that was chugging along well. And when COVID hit in the spring or in March, closed my practice down. My kids were home from school. Everything was shut down, very severe restrictions in the state of New Jersey. And as March and April kind of rolled on, my wife and I looked at each other and said, maybe this is our time to relocate. And we thought maybe it was God's way of telling us now is the time to do this. So in early May, I made 2 calls in the first week of May. I called a realtor and I called you the first week of May. And I decided in one day to sell my home in New Jersey and to register for the Florida bar exam. And within 2 months, we sold our home in New Jersey and we moved to Florida. And I was ready to go for the exam in July and went through that. I had about 8 weeks, so I was a little short on time when I initially signed up, which was stressful. But as we were given some extra time, and then it carried over to August, and then it obviously carried over until October.
And for those who are not familiar, what happened in Florida was that the exam was going to be given in July of 2020. And then because of COVID, it got pushed back and converted to an online exam in August of 2020. And then about 3 days before that test, you got a notification from the Florida bar examiners, right?
Of the August exam. Yeah. So I was literally sitting in my bed. It was a Sunday evening, reviewing my mind maps, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And my phone buzzes, and lo and behold, it's the Florida Board of Bar Examiners telling us that the exam was canceled. And that was really very disappointing for me because I felt ready. I just wanted to have it over with, and that was really a shock.
And then the exam gets extended into October. So you get this really extenuated period of study that gets added on. And it turned out for you to work out well because you had that extra time. But on the other hand, it also felt like I'm ready to go. I think you really felt ready in August. And then you have to sort of put the brakes on and then start all over again. What was that like?
Yeah, that was pretty unsettling. And as I recall from my days preparing for New York and for New Jersey, there's only a certain amount of time that you could really study this material effectively. In theory, it would seem that the more time you have to prepare, the better that it is. But I found by the end of that process toward like in September, early October, I was burned out. I was spent. I really lost focus. And I really struggled with those last several weeks before the exam. I felt like I overstudied, and in a weird way, I felt less prepared. So the extra time, I guess it was helpful just substantively that you would have time to prepare, but personally, I found it very unhelpful.
Yeah, and I think most people did as well. The pass rates were crazy. And for those that don't know, Florida did a strange one-day exam in which they completely discarded the multi-state bar exam, even though you'd been studying that originally. And then they went to 100 questions in the multiple choice section that Florida bar examiners wrote in 3 essays. So it was a very unusual exam in every respect, and it was given online. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about what it was like to take an online bar exam? Because, of course, you're in that first group of people to have ever done that.
Yeah, that was weird. So keep in mind, I graduated law school in '02, and I took the exams with a Scantron sheet and a blue book. So I had never taken any exam of any kind in college or law school on a computer. So that was the first issue. But taking the exam remotely was a source of considerable stress for me because worrying about things like internet connection, Wi-Fi, and the bar exam is such a uniquely important experience that the thought of having just a glitch on your Wi-Fi or an inability to connect or a storm come through or something that you just can't control that would limit your ability to take the test, to me, was very stressful. And then also just the small things. I was debating, do I take it at home or do I take it in my office? I wanted to take it at home, but where do I put the dog? What if the dog starts barking? My wife is ordering Amazon things delivered to the house multiple times a day. So who's ringing the doorbell? Who's knocking at the door? So I was concerned about those things and those distractions. So ultimately, I felt very comfortable in the comfort of my own office. I did take it at work. I took it in my office. But I had some reservations about being in a convention center during COVID, and I was not obviously entirely comfortable with that. Aside from those concerns, I would have preferred to take it in that convention center just because it's a more controlled environment. So,
Yeah, it's really interesting. Some people have said they like the idea of being able to stay at home and sleep in their own bed and be able to eat in their own kitchen. But I think that there is certainly some discomfort when you go to the unknown. And that's why I wanted you to share a little bit with people about that experience. Ultimately, for you, it worked out okay. The internet connections held, you were able to upload everything, and you didn't have any timing problems in terms of getting things done when they were supposed to be done with the bar examiners in that situation. But it is stressful. There's no doubt about it.
it was very, very stressful. And it took a lot of time to make sure, all right, do I have the software downloaded correctly? It seemed like every morning you'd wake up and the Florida Board of Bar Examiners would send you another update or a test, and you're going through all these emails when it's hard enough focusing on the substance of your studies, that making sure that all of that was done correctly was, again, also the source of some stress.
Being prepared made a difference, and you were prepared. You had the right equipment. You had thought through the process. You had discussed the location to take it and so on. And I think that's good advice for anybody, is to be prepared for the online exam. You started writing your essays and answering questions online in our course in preparation for that form of the test, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And what was that like for you to be drafting an essay online and to answer multiple choice questions online in practice, since, again, you're from an era where it was Scantron sheets and blue books and hard copy?
The essays, it was obviously helpful, and I've been practicing law for the last 18 years, so I'm used to organizing my thoughts on a computer, and so that was very helpful. The multiple choice was concerning because I preferred to do it, by hand, Xing out wrong answers, circling, underlining. I have to say, though, that the software that we ultimately used in Florida was extremely user-friendly. You could eliminate questions, you could highlight. So it ultimately turned out to be quite easy to use. So I didn't mind it at all. Doing the practice questions that you put up through your website was very helpful as well, because it up until that point, I was just doing them all in the books on your written materials. So going through that exercise of doing them on your website through your portal there, I found very helpful.
Good. The writing style was also obviously a bit different than what you remembered from your bar exams earlier, and certainly law school. Can you talk a little bit about the writing approach that you used through our course?
Yeah, so, and I guess I'll just take a step back and make just a bigger observation here, that I decided early on when I registered for your course. It was referred to me from another attorney who took the course, liked it. I read the reviews. I read the study guide. I kind of saw what your system was like and what your philosophy was. And maybe I agreed with some of it, maybe I didn't, but I made the decision early on. Clearly, you have a system that works. I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel. I'm just going to do what you asked me to do. And I followed the study guide to a T. So I did all the practice questions. I did the practice essays. As for the writing style, I found the FLA style initially a little bit cumbersome. It's not entirely different than the way I was taught with IRAC when I was in law school, or the way I would write briefs on the practice of law. So at the outset, I struggled with it a bit just to kind of get comfortable with it. But once I did that through many practice questions, I found it extremely helpful. I found it a very, very effective way with limited time to organize my thoughts, to make my points. And I think that was probably a significant factor in the fact that I passed the exam.
That's great. When you don't have the 200 questions of the multi-state, it puts such a heavy burden on those 3 essays and then making sure that those are solid. Then Florida did something interesting in their multiple choice that no one was expecting. They took a subject, trusts, which had never been tested in multiple choice format, and they put that into the exam. What was your reaction when you saw the trust question on the test?
Yeah, I was devastated by that. I was grossly unprepared. I think I emailed you that day or the next day. I studied trust, but in my experience, at least the way I viewed the subjects when I was studying is I kind of wrapped my head around it in this way. My goal with the essay subjects was to understand them. My goal with the multiple choice subjects was to know them, to know the material. I studied the trust material to understand it. Using my mind maps and doing the practice essays, I was able to articulate my thoughts in a way that I think was sufficient. I just wasn't prepared with the multiple choice. And it would seem that if either you or you don't, but I was surprised and it just threw me off. I was very, very concerned after the afternoon session.
Yeah, it was a real surprise. It has never been tested in that format ever. Interestingly enough, the mean score out of 30 questions was 19 correct. And so people did better than they thought they did, but still it was unnerving. I remember talking to you after the exam, and it was something of real concern for you. Ultimately, it turned out to be a non-issue for you. You mentioned mind maps, and I'd like to have you talk about that a little bit and what they are and how you use them, because I think the mind map ultimately gave you a point of reference through all of your work that was probably pretty valuable. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the single best advice that, or instruction or suggestion that I received from this course was to do the mind maps. That was the most helpful thing that I did to pass this exam. And I used the MindMeister app that you recommended, which was very, very user-friendly. And I did my mind maps at the end of my study. So when I allocated 3 weeks at the end of the study period, I did my mind maps then. And I went through every outline and I mind mapped every subject. And the larger subjects was maybe two or three mind maps. Most of them were just one sheet of paper. I did the mind map through MindMeister. I saved it. I went on to ups.com, and there was a UPS store right near my home. I uploaded it, and for like $1.50, you have it printed out on a nice a ledger size paper, so it was big. I brought a ledger size 3-hole binder, a book, and that was so critical for me because, number one, the process of doing the mind maps really everything was kind of coming together. But then the ability, after all those months and months and months of studying, to sit back and to look at 1 or 2 pages and see where everything fits in with everything else was so helpful for me, not only to understand it, but I could look at the mind map and I could say, if it's a property mind map, I could say, okay, this is landlord and tenant. I understand that. I get that. So I'm okay with that. But then future interest, I don't really get that. So I need to, get more into that. And really, at the last leg of studying, you don't really have time to be going back through all the notes and the videos and whatnot. So that mind map book was what I used exclusively the last week of studying. It's all I looked at. And that was so critical for me. I would recommend to anyone, if they do nothing else, after they're done in that prep period, that last phase, that review period rather, is to mind map.
I think that's great advice. We have found mind maps to be an incredibly helpful tool. So it's always exciting when somebody's able to employ those like you did and make it work for them. You were working while you were studying, right? You had moved your practice down here and there was still a lot going on and you put in a lot of hours. I know we get a lot of questions from practicing attorneys that say, can I do this? Can I come back and study after all these years and keep my work and my family and study? What would you say to somebody that's experiencing that or thinking about that process right now?
Obviously, the answer is yes, you can. It was a daunting task. And for me, again, my situation was so uniquely stressful because we're dealing with COVID, major life changes. Selling a home, packing, moving to another state, getting here, getting my kids settled in at school. I had a law practice, closing down a law practice, starting in with a law practice down here. And there was so many moving parts that to find time for studying was a real challenge. And I found that your study guide was so dummy proof in that what I did right at the outset, I said, this is how many hours I have. I put a big, huge dry erase board in my room with every week that I had. And I put, okay, here's what I need to accomplish this week based on the number of hours that you would recommend in the study guide. And I found that it forced me with working, with moving, with packing, with looking for houses. It forced me to be really efficient with my time, which I'm generally not terribly organized with my time. So it was a struggle, but it's certainly manageable. But again, I think this is true really of anyone taking the, when I first took the bar exam back in '02 for New York and New Jersey, I just graduated law school. I wasn't working. I just got up and studied every day. That's what I did. But to have to do that while you're working, while you're taking care of kids, it just requires discipline. I'd get up every morning at 5 o'clock and study for 2 hours because when the day got started, it was so hard to make time. So that was important for me. Very early morning, getting a couple hours in.
Yeah, I can remember seeing, we're able to tell when people are on the site, and every morning Al would be on the site and I'd be like, I like that guy. He's really on it. He's doing his work every day. So that was awesome. It didn't take too long after the exam in October to get the results out. There are still lots of jurisdictions as we're recording today that have not released their results from those early October exams. But what was it like on exam result day? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a really stressful day. I guess what they usually do is you don't have an exact day where you know that the exam results are going to be released. Or at least it wasn't when I took the test. You just wait in the mail. And I think back then we got them in the mail still. I'm not sure it was online, but knowing exactly which day we were going to get these tests, I came into my office early and I just kept hitting refresh. And it was stressful because I knew one of two things was going to happen. I was going to pass and I could just move ahead, enjoy the holidays, and start the new year fresh. And we're in a new home, in a new state, in a new practice. Or I was going to have to go through this again, through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through New Year's. And that really worried me. And then when I think about 10 or 11 o'clock, when the results came out, I couldn't get into the portal. So you can log into the Supreme Court website where they only give you your number. But I didn't even know what my number was. So I'm trying to look and see what my number is. So I find my number and I'm scrolling down. And it was just very stressful. And then I got to my name and realized that fortunately I passed. But, it's such a humbling experience because no matter how prepared you think you are or how intelligent you think you are, or you realize after you take this exam that the most prepared or the most intelligent or any one of us, I really say, but for the grace of God, I passed that exam. And I mean that. It was a very humbling experience for me. I really thought that there was a very fair chance I'd have to take the test again. So much so that when you said in your Florida review to start studying, I started studying again because I felt I did very well, or I felt I did well enough on the essays, and I felt I bombed the multiple choice. So I was by no means confident on November 20th, whatever the day was now, right the week before Thanksgiving of all days. But it was a very big relief when we went out for a nice dinner that night, and I've been very relaxed ever since.
And so your family must have been thrilled for you.
Yeah, my wife was very worried that I was going to have to take this test again because, all kidding aside, it puts a lot of strain on a family or on people around you. So, she was very supportive, and my kids.
That's good news. I'm so excited for you and pleased for you. I know that you worked really hard. You took it seriously. You followed the steps that we offered. You were diligent in all of that work. And so I know that there were moments when you probably were a little cockeyed about what is he telling me to do here? But you did it. And I'm so glad that it worked out for you. Are there any final pieces of advice that you would offer? Because I know a lot of people are going to be watching that will be in similar situations, particularly attorneys from the Northeast who are thinking about coming to Florida. Any advice you would offer them?
Yeah, I guess the only piece of advice that I would add to what we've discussed already is I did do a week or two before the exam your masterclass program that I thought was very, very helpful. And this is such a just psychological struggle having to do this, and being really mentally healthy is hard. And I was so stressed. And I found that to be a really, really helpful exercise. And I've always read since, I've been in high school, I'd read Dale Carnegie and Stephen Covey and Anthony Robbins. So I'm kind of receptive to that stuff to begin with. I know a lot of my friends who take the exam, they just kind of roll their eyes at that stuff and think it's all hocus pocus. It's not. Your ability to stay calm and focused. And I did those exercises before I took the exam. And I really, truly found that it helped me to relax and it helped me to focus. So I would strongly encourage anyone who's taking the exam to consider that program.
What Al's talking about is our Abundance for Bar Study masterclass, and it's work I've been doing for a long time and put together in a 90-minute webinar, and I'm really very proud of it. It's one of the best webinar classes I think I've ever done. So I'm glad that it was helpful for you. I am just delighted in your success. I know that getting settled in a new place at a new time is always stressful. Getting through the holidays, getting through COVID, getting through 2020, and certainly the strangest bar exam in Florida history, putting all that behind you has got to be just such a great feeling, like a huge burden is off your shoulders. So you look more relaxed today than most of the times I've seen you. So I'm excited about that. I really appreciate you sharing your background and your story with us and with our listeners. I know it's going to be very helpful to so many of them. And we wish you a wonderful experience here in Florida. Welcome to Crazy Florida. And I hope that it's everything that you hoped for and expected. But thank you again, Al, for being with us today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jackson.
And with that, we're going to say goodbye. We'll be back to you again next time with another interview with a successful student. And for now, bye-bye, everybody.